The musical Sweeney Todd is back on Broadway with Josh Groban in the title role. For Anthony Mason, their meeting was a chance to sit back, if not relax.
You actually took barber lessons for this?
I did. I wanted the shaving community, should they come to this show, to be really impressed.
He's the new Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
Do you have a razor back there?
You're a risk taker, Anthony. I never leave home without one.
And Josh Groban just learned how to give a close shave.
We would start with the neck, maybe, and then we would turn and we would do your cheek this way.
Is there an art to the decisive stroke?
You know, I'm just winging it. You know, it's really just, this is where the improvisation of theater comes in. I've never given anybody an actual, like, sharp razor shave, so, you know, we've enjoyed you on television for a long, long time.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you so much for spending your
final
final day with us here. That's right. Captured in high def.
Speak to me, friend.
In Sweeney Todd,
Whisper. I'll listen.
the new Broadway revival of Stephen Sondheim's iconic musical.
At last, my right arm is complete again.
Most of his customers don't survive.
You're not known for playing evil.
No, I'm not, which is part of the fun.
Did you come in for a pie, sir? Do forgive me if me head's a little vague.
As Sweeney, Groban has a co-conspirator. Anna Lee Ashford plays Mrs. Lovett.
Heaven knows I tried, sir. But there's no...
On the top, she's just a bubbling little pot of magic, and underneath, it's a stew that's extremely complicated.
And I've got some shepherd's pie peppered with actual shepherd on top.
Mrs. Lovett sweetly disposes of Sweeney's victims in her meat pies.
No will serve anyone, meaning anyone, and to anyone at all.
You know, when you're playing Iago, you don't know you're the bad guy.
That's right.
And so that's always sort of the way that I've viewed Mrs. Lovett.
Yeah.
She doesn't think she's bad, she's surviving. Mrs. Lovett at her core is a survivor.
Yes.
And she needs Sweeney Todd because she's a woman in a man's world.
Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
The original 1979 production, which starred Angela Lansbury as Mrs. Lovett and Len Cariou as Sweeney, won 8 Tonys. The unlikely inspiration for the musical was a dark Victorian melodrama, but Sondheim thought it could sing.
You know, the elevator pitch to something like this, you know, in 1977, you know, would have been like, well, have fun with that, Steve. You know, enjoy.
Good luck.
I'll never forget when Tommy Kail told me at an ice hockey game, you know, you should really come to this workshop I'm doing. It's about Alexander Hamilton, and it's a hip-hop musical. And I went, is it a comedy? What's, you know, and I'm kind of, you know, say, good luck with that, you know? Can't wait to see it. I'm sure it'll be great.
Is there a lot of expectation, do you think, with the show?
You tell me.
Thomas Kail, the Tony-winning director of Hamilton, is now directing Sweeney Todd.
You directed the best-known show on Broadway right now, right over there. How does this compare to that?
This was a huge source of inspiration. This was a show about a misunderstood person, and the world was trying to figure out why he did what he did.
Yeah.
The show on the other side of 46th Street doesn't happen unless there's Sweeney Todd.
I know, but he cares to take them. I should know. I make them for good now.
The comic relief in Sweeney comes with a Cockney accent.
It's not easy.
No, it's like speaking another language.
Don't you also, would you like a drop of ale?
Ashford got tips from the show's British choreographer.
Every once in a while he'll be like, it's budge. It's badge, not budge. Badge. You know, I'm like standing backstage going, badge, 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 badge. My little boy hates it. He's like, will you please stop doing your British accent? And I'm just not correcting him because I think it's too delightful.
You want a painter, poet, sculptor, preferably marble, granite, bronze, durable.
I have a 6.5-year-old little boy. The last time I was on stage doing 8 shows a week, he was not even 6 months old.
Which also must have been really hard.
It was really challenging. I was nursing.
Yeah.
I'd run off after Act 1 and intermission pump. It was just like, it was just all about milk. 8 shows a week and milk.
The last time Groban was doing 8 shows a week, the singer was making his Broadway debut nearly 7 years ago in Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812.
How much did you like that experience?
It's the happiest I've ever been in my career.
Really?
Yeah. I was a theater kid that hit a fork in the road when I found my way into the music biz. That was not something that I had dreams of in my bedroom when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
It was this.
It was Groban's manager who suggested he play Sweeney.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm not old enough to do that. And he's like, dude, you're gonna be 41. I'm like, oh my God, that is old enough. That's so nice of you, thank you. Oh my gosh, you shouldn't have.
He turned 42 the day we spoke with him.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, dear Josh. Happy birthday to you.
You have the voice of an angel.
No.
Has anyone ever told you that?
No.
It's beautiful.
See how they glisten.
The production had its first run-through a year and a half ago.
And Sondheim was going to be there. He was excited. And 2 days before we were to do that run-through, he passed away.
Did you think at first in that moment that this wasn't going to happen then?
Well, it was a lot of conflicting emotions because the first one, of course, was just grief.
Sondheim had been a fan of the Great Comet, and they'd become friends.
He said to me when we hung out once, I'm not going to tell you when I come to the show. I'm going to do you that solid. I said, Thank you, Steve. And then, of course, at intermission, you know, the group text is, red alert, red alert. The maestro is in the building, you know.
In the end, Groban and company went ahead with Sweeney Todd to honor Sondheim. And also because the star clearly enjoys giving a close shave.
You lean him back and then you send him down the slide.
I let him back, and then there's a third lever that sends him down. It's already fun.
He was almost famous at age 15. Later, Cameron Crowe wrote this semi-autobiographical movie by that name about a teenage journalist traveling with a rock band. Now he's bringing his story to the stage. Tracy Smith is on Broadway.
Help me, Rod. Help me. Help you.
Who doesn't remember this? Tom Cruise at the end of his rope.
Help me. Help you.
You're causing a major disturbance on my time.
Or Sean Penn's Spicoli.
If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time?
Or John Cusack's Boombox. Truth is, some of the more memorable moments ever put on film came from writer-director Cameron Crowe. But people tell him the one they really relate to is this.
Hold me closer, tiny dancer.
I have to go home.
Count the headlights on the highway.
You are home. 2000's Almost Famous is his story. He actually was the teen who left home to cover rock and roll.
Am I speaking to you clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
If you harm him in any way.
And the Frances McDormand character was based on his real mom, Alice.
You will meet the voice at the other end of this telephone, and it will not be pretty. Do we understand each other?
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't ask for this role, but I'll play it.
And the Oscar goes to Cameron Crowe for Almost Famous.
The film wasn't an immediate hit, but it caught on in home rentals. And for Crowe, it was among his career highs.
The movie was a love letter to music and to my family.
And now, 22 years later, that love letter is being read again, 8 times a week.
I look down, 'cause I can't see straight, and Mom's cooking again, so thank God I ate.
Almost Famous, the musical, opened on Broadway last week. Faithful to the movie and more.
If you're going to tell the story correctly, that's a personal story. You have to get personal.
Even if it's painful.
Sometimes, most of all.
Cameron Crowe grew up in San Diego and lived for a time with his mother and sister in this building. Their apartment was actually in the basement.
How long has it been since you've been back here?
50 years.
50 years?
Yes.
This is it, yeah?
Oh man, wow. I want to start listening to Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Black Sabbath. I can feel it coming. Holy mackerel. This totally feels like home. Got to check out the kitchen for a minute.
Yeah, go.
Yes, the vast expanse. But it's okay, because my mom was not a good cook.
But Alice Crowe was a college professor, and she had definite ideas about what her kids were learning.
Your mom didn't want any rock and roll.
She just felt that rock and roll was going to destroy brain cells.
But their apartment was just down the hill from San Diego's Old Globe Theater, and she'd take him there to see Shakespeare.
And your mother made you go to these plays.
Made me go. Demanded.
Of course, he'd thank her later.
Hello.
William Miller.
This is he.
William, this is Ben Fong Torres. I'm the music editor at Rolling Stone magazine.
Just like the kid in his movie, young Cameron started writing for rock magazines, Cream, Rolling Stone, and eventually graduated to screenplays and directing. Mom was proud, of course, but she wanted him to write a musical based on Almost Famous. In time, he did, and by 2019, he was ready to stage it. Where else? At the Old Globe. But only days before the first ever preview, Mrs. Crowe, who was in her 90s, had a bad fall and slipped into a coma. Anika Larson plays the Alice Crowe character in the show.
Did you get a chance to meet Alice?
I did.
Larson asked Cameron to let her go to Alice's bedside.
They say people in comas can hear, so he took me to the hospital. I held her hand, I introduced myself to her. I sang her 3 songs for her. I thought if she can't come to the show, we bring the show to her. And then he took me back and we did our first dress rehearsal that night. And she died that night.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was a lot, yeah.
And so the first audiences came in just after we'd lost her. And, you know, I felt her spirit every night. I feel it here now. To her last breath, she was saying, never give up. Tell this story. And we did.
In spite of it all, opening night in San Diego was a triumph. Joni Mitchell was in the crowd, and celebration was in the air.
And they would say, so are you going to go to Broadway? And I'm like, you know, we have tonight. People really loved it. And Joni Mitchell loved it. She actually thought it was better than the movie. If nothing ever happens, I'm good.
But in the end, he couldn't resist the chance to see his mother's dream happen.
Don't you dare break his spirit.
And the cast packed their bags for Broadway. And now, after a 3-year pandemic delay, it's all happening. Broadway composer Tom Kitt wrote a score that sounds both familiar and completely new.
Do you feel like you always ignore the desire to go and explore Morocco?
What was it like putting on that coat for the first time?
Oh my God. Addictive.
Solea Pfeiffer is Penny Lane, the role made famous by Kate Hudson.
It's all happening.
It's all happening.
One thing that is really exciting to me is that there was everyone who could see themselves in Kate Hudson, and now as a woman of color stepping into this role, you know, little girls like me get to see themselves in this role, so I feel like it just like cracked the door open just enough.
It's all happening.
It's all happening.
But beyond the music and the cast and the lights of Broadway, it's really about one family and a dream finally come true.
What is it like seeing your story come to life like this night after night?
Sometimes it rubs deeply, and sometimes it kind of opens up some raw memories. But to see your own life up there kind of with veins opened, you know, it's sometimes overwhelming.
So what do you think Alice would think of all this?
she would want 3 seats for like 2 of her friends on each side, and she would be there every night, just like she is. You do get messages from your loved ones, and I definitely know she's here.
Among tonight's nominees at the Country Music Television Awards, singer-songwriter Brandy Clark, whose work is about to make its debut on Broadway. She's a co-writer, along with Shane McAnally, of a new musical, Years in the Making. Here's Tracy Smith.
Says you can't do a show with country music on Broadway. You probably know every word of Oklahoma. The Mark Twain musical Big River won 7 Tonys.
But a man never trifles.
And Annie Get Your Gun was a big old hit, especially the countrified revival with Reba McEntire. And now a new country-themed musical about corn is ready to pop.
This corn ain't gonna shuck itself.
Shucked, which opens Tuesday, is that rarest of birds on Broadway. A completely original production.
It's like we have our own little corn hub.
Not based on a movie, or really anything else. The show started out as a nod to the old TV show Hee Haw, but after more than 10 years and a few complete overhauls, it's ready to stand on its own. It's the story of a small town closed off from society by cornfields. But when the corn starts suddenly dying, one brave soul goes to the big city for help, and a musical happens.
I used to be in overalls and curls, but that little girl is a woman of the world.
Caroline Innerbichler is the heroine, Maisie.
I have to call you family.
And Alex Newell is her cousin, Lulu.
But I get to call you friend.
My best friend, take your heart around the bend.
When you first heard a musical with country music, what did you think?
I think it makes perfect sense. Because country music, I've always felt, is the closest thing other than Broadway to Broadway. Because it's all about storytelling.
How about you, Alex?
Well, baby, you know I don't do country. I've done dance music, I've done Broadway, I've done jazz standards, I've done everything under the umbrella but country music. And so when I heard this, I was just like, okay.
Maybe love is like a sea.
It helps that the duo behind the music has some pretty impressive credentials. Brandy Clark, who herself grew up in a small town in Washington State, has written hits for the biggest stars in country. And she has an album that she made with Brandi Carlile coming out soon.
We absolutely have to say thank you to the sort of silent co-writers on this song who made this record with us, Brandy Clark and Luke Laird.
Shane McAnally is also one of the biggest songwriters in Music City. He's got 3 Grammys and a slew of other awards. But one of the things he says he cherishes the most is working with Brandy Clark.
Oh, God, no.
They clicked from the moment they met many, many hit songs ago.
And it was like lightning struck. And
we weren't even set up to write that day. We just met.
And it was boom.
It was.
What did you see in each other? What did you feel?
I saw myself.
Oh, I love that.
Sometimes I call you crazy. Sometimes I call you out.
Their music is key, but the sound you hear most often at a Shucked performance is laughter. Kevin Cahoon is Peanut.
I think if you could pick up your dog with one hand, you own a cat. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Heck, if I had a crystal ball, I'd probably walk real different.
A lot of the jokes are pretty edgy, and it's easy to see why.
The scene, it's musical.
The book writer, Robert Horn, used to write for a hit show on this very network.
If Hugh Hefner truly thinks that being publicly spread-eagled is so fantastic, how come we haven't seen his little wahoo with a staple in the middle?
You can kind of sense that there's a little designing women in this, yes?
There's a little designing women in all of us, yes.
Back then, his hair was long, and his comedy formula was simple.
I used to say, I'm gonna write it Jewish and you're gonna say it's Southern. That was the joke.
And that worked.
It did work, yes.
Turns out some of the cast are fans of that show, too.
It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, Designing Women was formative. It was appointment television for me every single week.
Do you have a favorite line from Designing
I
Women?
mean, it's everybody's favorite line.
What? Which one?
The light went out in Georgia.
So, Marjorie.
And that, Marjorie, just so you will know.
And someday your grandchildren will know.
Is the night the lights went out in Georgia.
Wow.
No one
We're
did a
fans.
speech like that. I'm independently owned and modulated. And every man that I meet is just intimidated. I won't change who I am.
2 days from now, the lights will be on in New York City. For composers Clark and McAnally, it's a beginning and the end of a long and emotional road.
Why don't you pretend I'm him?
Why don't you pretend I'm her?
What is it like to be there together and see this come to life?
We sit together every night through these previews. Alex Newell sings a song called Independently Owned in the middle of the first act.
I'm independently owned and liberated.
They received a standing ovation in the middle of the act. I'm a former addict. I have, tried everything that I like many times over. And I just looked at her and said, this is like no high I have ever experienced.
A couple of nights ago, I just had this overwhelming feeling like I was looking at the barn and Shay and I were sitting there and I was like, this is so weird for me to say this to you right now, but I just love you so much. And
I remember that moment. I'll never forget it.
Because that is how I feel when we're sitting there. Like, it is like, even though we're not a couple, it is like we have this child.
And the hope is that their child will be something Broadway and the rest of us could probably use right about now. A freewheeling, knee-slapping bundle of joy.
There are a lot of heavy shows, and we need heavy shows. We thrive off of heavy shows, but sometimes you just need to do a little laughing. Sometimes you just need to let that go and have a guffaw.
For days and days of corn, yeah, corn.
We've been inside for so long, and we forgot that joy can exist.
Christmas over and it's got the knowledge for. We were cornbread, we were cornbread. Now here we
Now appearing on Broadway, actor John David Washington. So what is it about that name? Califasane explains.
So when you're walking down the street and you look up and you see your name on the marquee, are you shocked or are you used to it by now?
Makes me nervous every time. Like, oh my God. But I also see like my chain, that's my uncle's chain, my Uncle Woodson. So like, I also feel like part of my family is with me.
Actor John David Washington is making his Broadway debut as Boy Willie in August Wilson's The Piano Lesson.
I'm comfortable up here.
Some would say the 38-year-old was born to act. His mom, Pauletta, is an actor, and so is his dad, a guy named Denzel.
My father, he walked me around these streets when he was getting ready for Shakespeare in the Park, Richard III. And I used to love when he would recite his lines.
At first, John David did not follow in his father's footsteps. He went to Morehouse, the historically black college in Atlanta, on a football scholarship.
What motivated it really was independence, was my own name, was being able to carry my own weight in my life. Even though I was hiding what I really wanted to do, it gave me an identity.
You were hiding what you really wanted to do.
Because of who I'm related to. My mother is an extremely talented artist, and my father is one of the greatest of all time. He's my favorite actor. I was intimidating. When we're in the comforts of my own home and with the family, I felt comfortable, but then when I get to the outside world, it didn't seem as simple to just pursue it. And I felt football would change that narrative when they saw me play ball.
It didn't quite work out that way.
That's what I thought was going to happen until I read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I think it was my freshman year, and I had a great game, and Denzel's son runs for as many yards and as many touchdowns. So I realized then it was inescapable.
After college, he played football in a startup league, the UFL. Then, in 2013, he ruptured his Achilles tendon. He decided to make a career change.
How do you make that turn? You start taking headshots?
I would recommend take some good headshots. But it was an open call audition for a story about football players.
Still injured and on pain medication, he went to his first audition for a new HBO series called Ballers.
The plan was get comfortable with auditioning, get told no, and then come out here to New York and study.
Again, it didn't go as he'd expected.
Welcome to the Miami Dolphins, son.
After a series of follow-up auditions, he got the part of Ricky Jarrett.
It was a life-changing moment for me. I felt good after like maybe the 5th or 6th audition, like, I can do this.
What did you learn about yourself as you started to become a professional actor?
I learned what happiness really is.
He went on to star in Black Klansman, directed by Spike Lee.
I'm undercover. He's got a gun. I'm a cop.
Then Tenet, directed by Christopher Nolan.
I realized I wasn't working for you. We've both been working for me. I'm the protagonist.
And now Amsterdam, directed by David O. Russell.
You've worked with, legendary directors. Now you're working with a director who's known you since you were a baby.
Right.
That's LaTanya Richardson Jackson, director of The Piano Lesson, which co-stars her husband, Samuel L. Jackson. The Jacksons and the Washingtons are old friends.
What's it like being on set with a partnership like that?
The attention's off me a lot of times. I gotta say that. So you sit back and you shut up and learn something, John David.
So does your co-star, Samuel, take direction from your director, LaTanya?
Well, define take direction. I feel like they speak another language in the subtext.
At the Yale Repertory Theater 35 years ago, Samuel L. Jackson originated the role John David is playing on Broadway.
If you have a piece of land, you'll find everything else fall right in place. You can stand right up next to the white man and talk to him about the price of cotton, the weather.
I'm on stage seeing Sam Jackson, and I'm delivering some lines, knowing he delivered these, in 1987. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. So, I guess God is saying, it's time. Just grow up, put up or shut up, man.
Have your parents come to see the play?
My mother is the question is how many times has she seen it? I get notes from them too. I get notes.
But John David Washington says he's done trying to prove himself.
I have to understand that I can have the best game. Career, the headline's always going to be what it is. So to try to prove something to somebody is a fool's errand.
Do you ever think about that day happening when people say, oh yeah, Denzel Washington, that's John David's dad?
Nah, I don't see it as a reality for me. He's larger than life. So no, I don't think of it that way. No, I can't.
Maybe one day you'll have a kid.
Right.
People will say.
I hope so. I hope so, yeah. Indeed, yeah.
What better title for a new Broadway musical than New York, New York? David Pogue takes us on Broadway.
I'll bet you can name this tune before the singing even starts.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today.
John Kander and Fred Ebb wrote that song. Their scores for Broadway shows like Cabaret, Chicago, and Curtains have won 4 Tony Awards, 2 Grammys, 2 Emmys, and a street in Times Square.
3, 2, 1.
Today, Kander is 96 and utterly uninterested in all the hero worship.
I don't relate to it. I really don't, just as I don't relate to the fact that we're sitting here doing some sort of interview on television.
But I mean, Chicago is now the longest running American musical in Broadway history, and you are now the longest working Broadway composer in history.
I think that's weird. I don't really feel much different than the insecure guy that met you all those years ago.
Oh, that's right. I've known Kander since 1987, when I played piano for his off-Broadway show, Flora, the Red Menace. He's always said that his music writes itself.
Music goes on in my head all the time, even while we're having this conversation.
Wow.
If I put my hands on the keyboard, they will do something.
So this is you composing right now. This is new stuff.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it's any good.
For over 40 years, Kander wrote the music and Fred Ebb wrote the lyrics.
Sometimes you're happy.
Freddie and I were such different people. And yet when we went into a room to work, all of that dropped away and we became one thing.
Fred Ebb died in 2004. And yet, this week, a new Kander and Ebb musical opens on Broadway. David Thompson co-wrote the script, and Susan Stroman is the director and choreographer.
It's easy.
Which is a big deal for me.
Oh my God. David Paul, oh my God.
Because we all worked on Flora, the Red Menace in 1987.
Well, you look the same.
We all look the same.
We all look the same.
Wow. I feel like I'm in New York.
Of course.
It's New York, New York, very loosely based on the 1977 movie, for which Kander and Ebb wrote 5 songs.
We wanted to celebrate artists who come to New York to change their lives, to be the best at what they do.
I came here with nothing, like hundreds before me, and millions behind me.
The musical is set in 1947 and tells 5 interwoven stories about aspiring musicians.
I won't be afraid. It's my New York.
It was right after the war. New York was hopeful. People were pulling plywood off the storefronts. There's something about that particular time that feels like the time now in New York. You know, we are going to pull this city back up to where it used to be.
Some of the songs come from the movie. Some are Kander and Ebb songs that have never been heard before. And some are new, with lyrics by another famous Broadway talent.
My job is to be as fast as he is and just, match him beat for beat.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of In the Heights and Hamilton, saw an early draft of the show.
I was just so knocked flat by the show itself, the beautiful love letter to New York. I just said, whatever else you need, please let me know.
For which we are not sorry.
One new song is set in Grand Central's Whispering Arch, an architectural quirk that lets you hear a whisper from 30 feet away.
When I heard you sing, it changed everything. Can you hear me? Could you ever be with a wreck like me? Could you hear me?
Could I ever be a part of the song inside your heart?
As for this song,
Start spreading the news.
that's not the first version Kander and Ebb wrote in 1977. The movie's star, Robert De Niro, didn't like the original song and asked that they try again.
Some actor was going to tell us how to write a song. Anyway, we went to the piano, and the first thing that happened on the piano with nothing in my head was... And inside of that vamp is starred, spread. And so we wrote that song in 45 minutes.
Oh, God.
No, truly. And I think it was partly because we were so pissed off.
Their second attempt became world famous. But Kander, with his trademark humility, doesn't get what all the fuss is about.
I listened last night to that audience kind of roar when that song happened. I just don't understand it. Here's what I understand. I understand making stuff and making stuff with your friends.
Come on.
I understand that every once in a while you will make something that you love. And the sizzle inside your guts when that happens is something that nobody can take away from you.
To Broadway now, where David Pogue is catching up with actor Sean Hayes.
This is the story of two men who became famous on TV about 50 years apart. Both hilarious actors, both piano virtuosos. First, Oscar Levant.
Listen, I can drop everything and be up in 10 minutes.
In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, he was everywhere. He was a movie star,
Swing your partner with a tra-la-la.
a composer, conductor, and concert pianist, and famous for his brilliant one-liners.
What do you do for exercise? I stumble and then I fall into a coma.
Hey, friends, lovers, mothers, and other strangers, you're never going to believe what happened to me.
The other man is Sean Hayes. For 11 seasons, he played the hilariously self-absorbed Jack McFarland on Will and Grace, the first sitcom with openly gay main characters.
What are you talking about? You're not a performer. I am now. Me, a piano, and a spotlight. I'm calling it Just Jack.
You're a comedian, Jack.
This week, a new play opened up on Broadway in which Sean Hayes plays Oscar Levant.
It's not a pretty face, I grant you, but underneath this flabby exterior, there's an enormous lack of character.
It's called Good Night, Oscar, an intense and funny play about a tortured man.
In case of what? I become irascible. You're always irascible. You're right, and that can only mean one thing. And what's that? I'm under-medicated.
After years of Jack McFarland, this is about as far from Jack McFarland as you get.
I love Jack McFarland. I love that experience. It's one of the greatest of my life. It's hard to break out of the thing that people see you as, that you became famous for. But then, you know, if we're not scaring ourselves as actors, what are we doing?
The darkness comes from Levant's drug addictions and mental health struggles. He broke taboos of the time by describing them publicly.
It was genuinely shocking in 1958 to see someone in Oscar's condition on television because he wasn't well, and at times he was heavily and often irresponsibly medicated.
Pulitzer Prize winner Doug Wright is the playwright.
But Oscar took the fangs from it away because he was always wonderfully and richly funny about it.
We have a bunch of pills here. Honestly, we know we got everything. I took them. They're nothing.
A well-behaved one-liner.
The play was Sean Hayes' passion project, written just for him. But not everyone considered him a natural to play Levant.
I won't lie. I thought Sean was an extremely odd casting choice. He doesn't have a physical resemblance at all. But we went to this lunch that was set up by the producers, and across the table, he morphed into the man. He adopted his posture, his voice, his perpetual scowl. And I went to that lunch thinking he was the wrong actor, and I left that lunch thinking he was the only actor.
We all worked together to just kind of find how I could inhabit him, and through voice and face and other kind of, you know, tricks, actor tricks that we could do.
She wants to read it to you.
Well, don't let them leave the dinner table till they finish their martinis, you hear?
In the play, Levant gets a 4-hour leave from a mental health facility to appear on Jack Parr's Tonight Show.
And this is based on a real incident?
Yes, in spirit, it's largely true.
So bring us up to date, Oscar. What have you been doing with yourself lately?
Well, my behavior's been impeccable. I've been unconscious for the last 6 months.
Really?
In both life and on Broadway, Levant was a friend of George Gershwin and a famous interpreter of his music. But it was a complicated relationship.
I play it all the time, the Rhapsody mostly, and now I'm the first piano man to immortalize it on a 78. Besides you, of course.
George loved to tease Oscar in what was sometimes a sadistic manner. He also would say to Oscar, what are you going to play for the folks tonight? A medley of your hit?
So you've heard it?
Yes.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. I mean, what'd you think?
Heard about it, rather.
In the play, Levant is supposed to conclude his talk show appearance at the piano with a blazing performance of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. Fortunately, Hayes himself is a gifted piano player.
I'll try to play a little bit of a Chopin waltz.
Nice.
Five years old or so. And so I started taking lessons across the street, and I just stuck with it. I thought I was going to be a concert pianist or a film music composer. Anyway.
He's the real deal, folks!
It's the finale of an emotionally draining performance.
The play ends in a very kind of sensitive, emotional place. And gosh, even thinking about it now, I get a little emotional because mental illness and addiction run in my family tree. And so I feel for Oscar in an extremely deep way.
Is it exhausting?
It's absolutely exhausting. A lot of times after the show, I am depleted so much that I really just have to go home and take care of myself.
Good Night, Oscar has a limited run, 4 months. But for Sean Hayes, any effort to bring back Oscar Levant is worth the attempt.
There's nobody like him. There is nobody as funny as him. He's just been kind of forgotten about. I'm just happy and proud that we have this venue and this vehicle to bring Oscar back to life because I think he deserves it.
It's considered one of the greatest movie comedies of all time. Now, Some Like It Hot is a hit on Broadway. Tracy Smith finds that what's old really can be new again.
You could say the movie has legs. In Some Like It Hot,
I understand you're looking for a couple of girl musicians.
Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon
Where do you think you're going?
Urbana?
play two musicians on the run from the mob who disguise themselves as women
My name is Josephine. I'm Daphne.
and wind up making Hollywood history.
Upsy daisy. Fresh.
The film came out in 1959,
It's Oscar night in Hollywood.
and 63 Oscar nights ago, it was up for 6 awards.
Jack Lemmon was nominated for impersonating a girl. I remember when he used to get arrested for that.
But Some Like It Hot did more than just make an audience laugh.
How do they walk in these things?
You might not know that director Billy Wilder is said to have practically pushed the two men into the ladies' room to see if they could pass for the real thing.
This is from me to you, doll.
They did.
Beat it, Buster.
Or that Tony Curtis would need to ice his feet every night after a day spent in high heels.
I'm Sugar Cane.
Hi. Sugar Cane?
Yeah, I changed. It used to be Sugar Kowalczyk.
Or that Marilyn Monroe, as Sugar Cane, was pregnant during filming and delayed production with her chronic lateness.
Josephine, yoo-hoo!
But it was a triumph anyway, says UT Austin film professor Noah Eisenberg.
How was Some Like It Hot received back in 1959?
The critical praise for this film was extraordinary. It was, along the lines of run, don't walk to get to the theater to see this movie.
Of course, not everyone ran to see it. Some Like It Hot landed on the National Legion of Decency's list of morally objectionable films. But now it's on other lists, like #1 on the American Film Institute's 100 Best Comedies of All Time. And it's still as funny now as it was then.
Hi, Jerry. Osgood proposed to me. We're planning a June wedding.
This scene with the maracas in the hotel room, they had to time it so that the jokes didn't get drowned out by laughter.
You think he's too old for me?
Jerry, you can't be serious.
Why not? He keeps marrying girls all the time.
That's why he put the maracas in.
For precisely that purpose. And you need to be able to time how long approximately it's going to take an audience to finish their belly laugh so that they can get to the next one.
But you're not a girl, you're a guy. And why would a guy want to marry a guy? Security.
But beyond comedy, it was a film about reinvention, made mostly by people who had reinvented themselves. Marilyn Monroe was once Norma Jean Mortensen. Bernie Schwartz became Tony Curtis. And now the film itself has been reinvented on Broadway. The bones are the same, but it's definitely not just a rehash of the original, says director Casey Nicholaw.
I think the thing that made the movie special and that people loved is you were seeing these two movie stars dressed as women. And that was funny to people. And it doesn't fly now. And I don't want to see it now. And I'm not really interested in doing that now, But I think the discovery of these guys, while they have to do that to get away from the law, is what makes our show different.
So if you can boil it down, what's the message?
Well, the message is basically self-love and everyone being nice to each other.
And here, just as in the movie, the musical score is crucial. Adriana Hicks is Sugar Cane.
I mean, you're taking over the role that was created by Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. Were you a little intimidated?
I was, starting out, because I didn't know what was going to be asked of me, especially being a Black woman portraying an iconic white woman,
So when you're coming into work every day, do you still get that seeing the marquee?
It doesn't get old.
Yeah, no.
Opening the stage door never gets old.
Christian Borle and J. Harrison G. are in the Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon roles, and it's a workout for them every night.
As the Undertaker starts his spiel, please remind him we're a package deal.
The show is one dance number after another.
There's jumping, there's flipping, there's falling, there's chasing.
And that's both a challenge and a welcome change for a cast who had to wait for this moment through the pandemic.
And we did it!
We were all traumatized for years not being able to be on stage. So to be back and see those faces and see them laughing and see them happy, it's why we do it.
Yeah.
That and the money,
J. Harrison G., who identifies as non-binary, sees his role as Daphne as his ministry, and his calling is to open minds. He points to a comment from a man in the audience, overheard by one of the crew.
And he said he was sitting next to this man, and he was with some woman, and I did my song in Act 2, You Could Have Knocked Me Over with a Feather. They applauded, and the man just turned to the lady and goes, I need to treat my son better. Wow. That's my ministry. That's why I do what I do. I don't care about a review and a paper and a thing. It's reaching the hearts of the people sitting in those seats, and you think just a little differently than when you came in the theater.
Certainly is delightful having young blood around here.
Oh, well, personally, I'm type O.
The movie and the Broadway show couldn't be more different.
A bunch of us girls are going to go for a swim. You want to come along?
A swim? Oh, you...
But in some ways, they both feel the same.
Sugar, come on, let's play ball.
Professor Noah Eisenberg.
To see Jack Lemmon really becoming quite comfortable as Daphne.
Yes, he embraces his inner Daphne toward the end.
And in fact, Harrison Gee, who plays Daphne on stage, says all of us, we all have a Daphne inside us. It's an extraordinary performance.
That's good. I'm gonna level with you. We can't get married at all.
And talk about extraordinary. The famous last line in the movie was just a placeholder until they came up with something better. But Wilder kept it in after test audiences went wild.
But you don't understand, Osgood. I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.
Sometimes, in Hollywood and on Broadway, you just never know what's going to be hot.